Hey there, what's going on? My name is Basir Payenda, and in this video we are going to create a multi-step registration form using only HTML, CSS and vanilla JavaScript. Alright, so this is what we're going to be building throughout this entire video. You can see that it's got like 4 steps starting from the intro all the way to the address. So when I click this next button, it's going to go from the intro to the contact section here, and likewise finally the address. Alright, so without any further ado, let's dive right into it and translate this to code. Okay, so back in here I'm going to create the index.html file, and then followed by that I'm going to create the style.css file, and for the JavaScript script.js, and back into index.html the HTML boilerplate, and obviously I want to link this to style.css, and in here link it to script.js as well. Alright, and for the title I'm going to simply call this registration form like that. Okay, so in the body I'm gonna have a form with a class of form, and it's not gonna go anywhere, and then form step and form step dash active, so it's gonna be the active form step here, and then input group, and it's gonna be a label, so it's the username, it's gonna be username, and then input type of text, the name is username, and the ID is also username. There we go, and then I'm gonna create one more here, so that's the input group with the label. I'm gonna call this position, the label is position, input type of text, this is also position, and the ID is also position. Okay, and then right here you're gonna just simply place a button. Okay, anchor tag with the class of button and button dash next here. It's not going to go anywhere, and you're going to just call that as next. So if I run this in live server, so you will see this is how it is going to look like. Okay, so I'm going to just zoom this in a little bit, and then back in here in the style.css I'm going to get the before, likewise the after, and set a box sizing of border box for this. Okay, I'm going to change it to CSS, and then for the body I'm going to add a font family, the font family that I like, and then I'm going to go with Sigu UI as a fallback font family. I'm going to set the margin to be 0, and then display this as grid, then place the items to the center. Alright, so this way everything is in the center, and you can notice that I didn't put a minimum height of 100 vertical height here. Alright, so this is how it's going to look like. I'm going to zoom this out a little bit, and then right here, okay, for some reasons my CSS snippet is not working. Okay, so this is going to be for the form, so I'm going to specify a width for this, a minimum width of 320 pixels, 30%, that's the ideal width we want for the form, and 420 or 30 pixels for the maximum width here. Okay, and the margin of 0 and auto. Then we're going to also add a border of 1 pixel solid, some kind of gray color here, and also a border radius of like 0.35 rem here. Okay, so the corners are a little bit rounded. Then we're gonna also add some inner padding here, 1.5 rem. There we go. So this is how it is gonna look like. Then we also need to style this input groups, the label and the input as well. So right here I'm gonna say some global stylings are gonna go right here. So for the input it's gonna have a display of block. Okay, and gonna have a width of 100%, then a padding of 0.75 rem, and let me see, a border of 1 pixel solid CCC, and a border radius of 0.25 rem. Let's check it out, how's that gonna look like. Okay, so it kind of looks good. And for the label right here, label, we're gonna display this as block as well, and then a margin bottom. In this case I'm gonna go with 0.5 rem, so there's a little bit of room between this username and the position right here. Okay, so back in here I'm gonna capitalize this username, and for the input group, input dash group, so I'm gonna go back into index.html. This is the input group that's gonna serve as a wrapper for the label and the input. Okay, so just gonna have a margin of like let's say 2 rem and 0, so just that to make sure that there's a little bit of space between the label and the input, between those. Okay, so yeah, that's it. It looks good. And then down below right here, some styles for the button here. I'm gonna get the button at a padding of like 0.75 rem, and I'm gonna also display this as block. Then I'm gonna get rid of its border. Well, it doesn't has any border indeed. I'm gonna get rid of text decoration and set that to none. So this is how it is gonna look like. You will also want to add that background color for that too. Okay, so where is that? Okay, so what I'm gonna do is background color. Let's see, I'm gonna first just comment this out right here and then go all the way up until here. I'm gonna create a variable in the state root, and then primary color, and then right here let's say red. Okay, so what I meant to use is some kind of color like this. Okay, what is that? There we go. So the primary color, we're gonna reference it right here from the variable dash primary color. There we go. So go back, and that's how it's gonna look like. So I'm gonna also add a color for this. It's gonna be totally white, and text align to the center. Okay, so go back, and that is it. Obviously we want to add a cursor of pointer too, and a border radius of 0.25 rem here. Okay, so there we go. And then in index.html, I'm gonna add some additional classes here with 50, because I want this to be like 50%, and ML auto to position it at the right side. So these are gonna go in the global styling section right here. So with -50, what that means is gonna have a width of 50%, and then ML-auto is gonna say margin left, set that to auto. There we go. So now you can see that the next button is positioned right here at the very right side. And then down below, I'm gonna go button. When I hover on that, I'm gonna also add a box shadow of like 0.002 pixels. I'm gonna go with a white color, and then 0.003 pixels. Come on. And then again from the variables, it's gonna go with that primary color. So now when I hover on that, and here's this little nice effect for the button. Okay, I'm gonna also add a transition of 0.3 second, so that looks a little bit better whenever we are hovering on that. All right, so this is it. And then back into here, I also need to add an h1 right here. We're gonna call this as registration form, and I'm gonna also add a class right here. I'm gonna say text center. Okay, and style the CSS all the way to the global stylings right here. I'm gonna say text-center, so it's gonna just text align everything to the center, whatever that has that class indeed. All right, so this is it. We just created the very first step of this, and then back into index.html, I'm gonna also create the rest of that. Okay, so I'm gonna duplicate this down below right here, but this time instead of username, it's gonna be different. I'm gonna call this phone. Okay, and then this is gonna be the email. All right, and in here I'm gonna call this buttons group. Okay, so earlier there was only one button that has to be positioned at the right side, but now we have to position two buttons. So I'm gonna duplicate this down below. Obviously I need to get rid of these as well, with 50 and ML auto, and then change this to be previous. And then instead of button next, I'm gonna call this to be button prev. Okay, so go back, and there we go. This is the phone and the email, but you can see that these are kind of hooked on top of each other. So what I'm gonna do is go back to style the CSS all the way to the bottom, maybe above the button class right here. So buttons-group, I'm gonna display this as grade, and then grade template columns to repeat to 1fr, and I'm gonna add a gap of 1.5 rem here. Okay, so that there's a little bit of space between these two buttons. Okay, so there we go, the previous and the next button. You can see the phone and the email. Indeed, I need to go back here and capitalize this. All right, so that is it. We just created it successfully, and now we're gonna also just duplicate this down below, but this time it's gonna be for I'm not sure, It's gonna be for the date of birth, I think. DOB for date of birth, so it's date of birth. Come on. So instead of text this time, we're gonna go with date here, okay? And I'm gonna also replace email with an ID, and then it's gonna be a type number, okay? So yeah, this is it. I'm gonna indeed call this to be national ID, okay? And then I'm gonna also duplicate this down below, and this is gonna be for the password, okay? And the type is also password. And then here I'm gonna call this confirm password, okay? So the text is confirm password, and I'm gonna replace date of birth with password. There we go. And we got to change this to password as well. And this time, instead of that next, we're gonna go with an input or a button with the type of submit, and the value of that is gonna be submit. It's gonna have a class of button, and button, yeah, only button, that's it. Okay, so going back to here, so we have the username and position, then we have the phone and email part here, then password and confirm password. All right, so yeah, that's it. And then now we also need to do some extra steps right here, and that is to add the progress bar as well. Okay, first I'm gonna handle this, then I will add that progress bar as well. Okay, so going back to here, we have this form step dash active, so I'm gonna go right here, step dash, actually that is form dash step. I'm gonna display this as none, and then we have this form step dash active, which has display of block here. Okay, so in here, remember that only one of these steps right here can have this class of form step dash active, so the rest of that don't need this, so I'm just gonna delete it from there. Okay, so this tree doesn't need that, so I'm gonna delete it, and that is it. So we are only left with the username and position. All right, so now we also need to add that progress bar, as I said earlier. Okay, so down below here, I'm gonna say that these are gonna be the steps, and then here, this is the progress bar. All right, so again, I'm gonna create a class of progress bar, and within that, it's gonna be this class of progress step 4 times. Okay, so that is it. And if you go back, you can see that visually nothing has changed, but we're gonna add all the things that we added earlier using CSS. Okay, so I'm gonna go back into style.css, and that's something that's gonna go below right here. So it's the progress bar. There we go. So this progress bar itself is gonna have a position of relative, and then down below here for the progress dash step. Okay, so these are the one that's gonna matter. So I'm gonna add a width of like 35 pixels that gets converted to rem like that. So that's the height. It's also 35 pixels. And then I'm gonna add a background color. In this case, DC. It's kind of grayish background color though. And I'm gonna also add a border radius of 50%, so that it's totally around here. So going back, I'm gonna go back here. You can see that all the progress steps are showing up like this in here. And then for this one, I'm gonna display this as flex. Okay, see, and justify content to be a space between, like that. So now you can see that all of these are positioned like this. And then we also need to go with the progress bar. I'm gonna get the before, set the content to be just nothing. It's gonna have a height of 4 pixels, and then it's gonna have a width of 100%. Obviously it needs to be positioned as absolute. From the top it is 50%, and translate y to a negative 50% too. Let's see, I also need a background color. I'm gonna go with this background color, so both are the same. So there we go. And now what we need to do is to add a number right here. So 1, 2, 3, and 4, and some title below these right here. So it is intro or info or whatever. Okay, so going back into here, in order to add those numbers, I'm gonna use the counter CSS property. Okay, so with that, I'm gonna say counter reset and set this to step, and down below right here, progress step, and I'm gonna go with a B4 right here. I'm gonna say counter increment for the step right here, and for the content of that, I'm gonna go with the counter of step. So now if I go back, you can see that the number is created right here. So it's 1 1 1 and all of that, but okay, there seems to be a small problem. Actually, this counter step, this has to be come on, this has to go right here. Okay, yeah, there we go. So now you can see it is incremented from 1 all the way to the 4. So the way that this counter work is that okay, so a better way to understand it is that with counter reset, think of this, that in here we are initializing a variable, we are declaring a variable. Okay, although it's not a variable, but it's a better way of understanding. So think of it like you are gonna either create or reset a counter using this counter reset property, and you're gonna name it. So in this case, we're gonna name this a step, and then down below right here, we're gonna increment this by 1. So it's always gonna go from 0, I believe, and then we're going to increment that by 1, and using this counter and passing in that variable or that step here, then you can see that it's going to pass all the way in here. And now we need to somehow position this right in the center in here, so it's not at the edges there. So I think we can simply say display flex, justify content to the center and align items to the center, and go back. Okay, so I'm gonna just indeed cut this off of here and paste it right there. Okay, so going back, now you can see that these are positioned in the center, and somehow it looks like that this line is on top of that. So we can get rid of that just by specifying a z-index of like -1, like that. Alright, so 1 2 3 and 4, that is it. Now we need to also add that text beneath this, below right here. So it's, for example, intro, ID, or whatsoever. So for that, I'm gonna go in index.html right here, and then I'm gonna add a data title of, so it's gonna be different for all of these. So this could be like the intro, this is the contact, this is the ID, and finally this one, it is the password here. Okay, so then if I go back, you can see that those changes are not reflected in here because we haven't used these. So I'm gonna go back into step, style the CSS, and progress step, I'm gonna get this progress step after, and set its content from the attributes. So this method is gonna just refer back to the attributes. It's like, you know, class, progress step, these are the attributes. Okay, so I'm gonna pass in this data-title, and then it's gonna grab the value of that. Okay, so I'm gonna just paste that right here, and then go back. Now you can see that the intro, contact, ID, and password, they are all showing up. Now we need to just style it and position this right below here. Okay, so for that, I'm gonna position this, position this as absolute, and from the top, I'm gonna go with this calc, and then let's say 0.75 rem. And then I'm gonna also decrease the font size of that to 8.5 rem or something, and go back. Now you can see intro, contact, ID, and password, they are all showing up really nice right here. I kind of think that this is a little bit more, and I'm gonna also give it a slightly less dark color here. Okay, and a little bit of a space too. So in here, I'm gonna say margin of like 3 rem and 0, and go back. And yeah, so now it looks a little bit better. However, you can say like 2 rem, and then this is like 4 rem here. Okay, go back, and yeah, so this is looking better, much better now. Okay, so now we need to handle it through JavaScript. So first, let me just go to a 100% view. So this is how it looks like when it's 100%. Okay, so I'm gonna use JavaScript now in order to go from the first step to the second step, and meanwhile I'm gonna animate this section of the form step as well, and with that I'm gonna also update this progress bar right here too. Okay, Before going to the JavaScript, I just remembered that this intro, it has to be active. So I'm gonna go back into index.html. I'm gonna say progress step dash active. So in this case, it's just gonna make sure that the intro is active here. Okay, so I'm gonna go back and progress step dash active, and then I'm gonna add a background color for this. It's gonna be that primary color, and then the color of the text is gonna be whitish color here. So now you can see that it's already saying that step 1 is active, the intro is active. This is the intro step. Okay, so then now back into here in script.js, I'm gonna go and get the previous buttons and the next buttons here. So prev buttons, it's document.query selector all, and then here I'm gonna pass in that button dash prev. There we go. And then I'm gonna also get the next buttons too. So that's document.query selector all, and then button dash next. There we go. And down here I'm gonna also get that progress. That's document.getElement by ID. I just remember I haven't yet created it, so I'm just gonna do it real quick here. So this is the progress bar, and right here I'm gonna create progress and then progress again. So if you're wondering what is this is actually the line that is going from the first step to the second step and from second to third and fourth. Okay, so this is that line, and it really doesn't need much styling. It's basically gonna go with all the stylings of this one here, and in addition to that, from what we know, it has that background color from the variable of this primary color, and yeah, that's it. It's gonna have a width of 0%. So that is it. In script.js, back again. Let me see if I didn't break anything. And then I'm gonna go and get all the form steps too. So in this case, that's document.query selector all, and then .form dash step. Okay, back into index.html, just the form step. And then down below here, I'm gonna say next buttons dot for each. So looping through each one of those buttons individually. And then I'm gonna say button dot add event listener. In this case, when I click on that, I'm gonna run this arrow function. And this arrow function, what's gonna do basically is gonna dive from the first step to the second step. But before that, there is something that we have to take care of. How do we tell the computer, the JavaScript, that we are going from the first form step to the second one? Okay, so we can keep track of that by creating a variable of, I'm gonna call this as form steps num. Okay, so I'm gonna set this to 0, but whenever I'm clicking on that, I'm gonna just increment it by 1. Okay, and then I'm gonna call a function called update form steps. There we go. So then down below right here, I'm gonna create another function called that update form steps. And what is this gonna do basically is that it's gonna just get the form steps right here and then pass in that index that we are looking for. So dot class list dot add, and then we're gonna add that active class, which was this form step dash active. Okay, let's just copy this so I don't make any typo. So I'm gonna paste that in, and if I click that next, okay, so it is not working. Make sure that it's connected to script.js and there is no spelling typo here. Next buttons. Okay. On click, we're gonna, yeah, this is form steps number here. I'm gonna copy this and then paste it right here, and then go back and click that. Okay, there we go. So it's showing up the next step, and you click that. It's also showing the previous steps as well. Okay, so now we need to handle it that whenever we are going to the next step, we want all the previous and the other future steps to be hidden. Okay, so the way we can do that is just, I'm gonna go right here and say form steps dot for each. Again, I'm gonna go through all the form step, loop through all of them, and then I'm gonna say form step dot class list dot contains. So if it contains the class of form step dash active, okay, so if that is true, then I'm gonna say form step dot class list dot remove the class of form step dash active. So then if I go back here, now I click next, you can see that now only one of those steps is active at a time, like so. There we go. So yeah, it is looking nice. We also need to handle the previous button as well, so we just need to replace the next button with previous button, and instead of incrementing, we are gonna decrement this time. Okay, yeah, there we go. And also maybe you want to add a little bit of animation. I don't know if you like this animation, but if you don't, you can skip this one and don't add it here. Okay, I'm gonna say 0.5 second, and then keyframes, animate. It's gonna go from transform and scale of 1.0 and an opacity of 0.2. Okay, to transform, and it's gonna scale 1.1 here, and it's gonna have an opacity of 1, like that. Okay, so now if I click next, something is wrong, so I'm gonna go back here. Yeah, I also need to add a transition as well, I think. No, seriously. Yeah, it's just nonsense. I add that right here. So I'm just gonna go, yeah, this is the progress step active. Okay. Okay, so this is supposed to go for the form step. Okay, I'm gonna also cut this off from here and then paste it down below here. And now what's gonna happen is that, okay, so that is working, but the transform origin is from the bottom or maybe from the center. And what you can do is say that transform dash origin, and I'm gonna specify for the top here. So now you can see it is animated from the top. You go to the next and it's gonna animate that. Okay, it's phone, and next date of birth, and next the password and the confirm password. All right, so yeah, it is working nice. So the mistake was that I was adding it for the progress step after. Okay, so yeah, that should be for the form step indeed. Okay, so back into here. Now that we updated the form steps, we also need to somehow update these as well. So it's going to go from the intro to the contact, and ID, and the password. Okay, so the way we can do that is that we can create one more variable right here and start from 1. But if you want this to be simple, okay, so we only use this variable to keep track of which step we are and in which progress step we are. So I'm going to use this one here. Okay, but I'm gonna just call another function. I'm gonna say update progress bar. Okay, so I'm then just gonna copy that out and then paste it right here, and then down below I'm gonna create another function, update progress bar. And basically what is this gonna do is that, so let's just make sure we get all those progress steps. Okay, so these are the progress steps. We need to get all of these. So I'm gonna go down below here, progress steps, that's equal to document.query selector all, and then dot progress step. There we go. So then I can use this right here, say that progress steps dot for each of these progress step, and I'm gonna also get the index. You'll get to know that in a little bit. Why do we need that? So if the index is less than the form steps number, okay, plus 1. Okay, and then right here we're gonna say progress step dot class list dot add the class of progress step dash active. Otherwise, and else, we're gonna just simply remove that. Okay, so instead of add, we're gonna say remove. So then if I just go back and click that, you can see it successfully go from the intro to the contact, and likewise to the ID, and finally the password. And the reason why we are adding this +1 right here, that's because even if we are in the very first step right here, so now you can see it's already one of those are active. So the way this condition works is such that it's always looking if the index of that current progress step is less than form steps number plus 1. So it always, somehow this has to be at least one number greater than that for it to work, okay? And the final step is that we also need to update the line that's going from the intro all the way to the password as well. So for that, I already get that progress here. You can see get element by ID. If I go back here, you'll see that this step right here, okay? So I'm gonna go, and then I'm gonna say progress.style.width, and that is equal to, yeah, I also need to get the current active number of progress step active here. So constant of progress active, whatever, document.query selector all, and then dot, we're gonna add that right here, okay? So I'm gonna get the progress active dot, okay, dot length -1, and then divide that by the progress steps dot length -1, and then multiply it by 100 plus, I'm gonna add this percentage at the very end of that as well. Okay, first let's see if this is working. Yeah, so there we go. I just need to go to style.css, and for the progress right here, we're gonna add a transition of 0.3 seconds. So then go back, and there it is. So finally this is working really nice. And the reason why we are decrementing -1 from the progress active from here, that is because we are already in this step. Okay, let me see. So when we start the progress, the registration form from, I mean, when we are loading it, we are already in this one right here. So this is active, okay? So somehow we need to specify the width of the progress bar to be 0%, okay, so that it starts from the 0%. This progress active dot length, this is gonna return 1, and then 1 -1, that is equal to 0, and 0 divided by any number is again equal to 0. So that is why we want this progress bar to start from 0%, because we are not making any progress right now, but when we are clicking that, it's gonna go 1 to 2, and then this formula is gonna work for the rest of that as well. Okay, so I hope it is clear. Okay, so just repeating, okay, because we want this progress to start from 0%, we are doing this trick so that it goes from 0% all the way to 100 or 99.999%. All right, so I'm gonna click next and see if there is anything else we have to cover. Yeah, so that is it. I think there is nothing else to cover. Alright, so that was it for this video, everyone. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, and turn on the bell notification for more videos like this, and I will see you guys in the next one. Thank you for watching.